All right, I'm down here at the beach in Campbell River with the grandkids doing some beach combing there in the tidal pools. This is a really nice day today. But I've been thinking about this video for a couple of weeks now, and I'm thinking I got to get at it here and just to share with you. And you know, Justin Trudeau recently talked about declaring a climate emergency of all things. I'm going, what emergency? We've had some bad weather here and there in the country, and you know, 40 years ago, they'd say, man, wasn't that a bad storm? Oh, that's crazy. We got to clean up, you know. Now, it becomes a climate emergency that man's caused because you're driving your car and you're emitting CO2, or the cows are farting, or you got plastic clothes or something, anything that's man's stuff. And you know what? You've heard me say it before. I don't buy it. I don't buy into any of the stuff at all. I think if you went to high school and you remember about the lessons you learned on CO2 and oxygen and carbon, you'd go, this is nonsense. And it's amazing how people have just gone, whoa, look at their blank look, you know. And so what I want to talk about here is reasons I don't believe in the whole man-made global warming climate change narrative. I'm not arguing with a lot of the stuff they're putting forward, but here's why I think it's not true. And I've got a lot of suspicion around it. And I'll just give you some reasons. I had them written down, but I don't have them with me. I'm just at the beach, thought I'd do it. First off is, notice all the mix-up on the words about carbon and carbon dioxide and what it is. Why have they changed it to talking about carbon? You need carbon credits. Carbon is that black stuff, you know, you charcoal. That's why I guess like they wanted to think of that way. Carbon is what everything is made of. It's an element that everything is made of. And if you remember in your lessons in high school in science, carbon and oxygen go together, producing the energy that makes all living things run. The byproduct is carbon dioxide. The plants absorb the carbon dioxide and emit oxygen, and the cycle starts again. When you say you're against carbon dioxide, that means you're against life. Every living thing, except maybe some anaerobic bacteria in the bottom of the ocean down by the vents. Every living thing lives on carbon dioxide and carbon and oxygen. Every living thing. This is a movement that's speaking against life, to tax the air we breathe. There's something really, really wrong with what's going on here. I'm telling you that. And I wish people would just start using their brains again and the elementary basics of science you learned in school and start to say, wait a minute, this doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense. Now, how much carbon dioxide are we talking about, and how much is the increase that we're speaking of here? Well, the atmosphere, you know, it's got nitrogen and oxygen and all of that, helium, lots, like 23% oxygen, I think, and all that. Carbon dioxide is minuscule, hardly anything there, but it's necessary for life. It's 0.04% of the atmosphere. How much is 0.04? Well, I've got a tape here for surveying, and if I run it down to the water, it's about 30 meters down there, way down there to the water where the kids are. Where'd they go? They moved over there now. And if that was all the oxygen, or all the atmosphere, if that's what the atmosphere is made of, from here down to there, let's say, how much of that is carbon dioxide? Here we go. 30 meters. It's one of these lines. Okay? Somewhere between 25 and 30 meters. One of these lines is how much CO2 is in the atmosphere. And how much are we talking about increasing man-made CO2 like this year? A fraction, tiny little fraction of that. So how do you measure? Let me put it in another way. If the composition of the Earth's atmosphere was represented by the distance that you would fly in a plane from here, Vancouver, to St. John's, Newfoundland, the amount of that is CO2 is the length of the runway. Okay? Distance across Canada, right out to Newfoundland. The amount of it, the CO2, is the length of the runway. The amount of increase that we're talking that man makes, say this year, if it increased the same rate, is about 100 meters down the runway. The plane just goes taxiing and stops. That's it. That's the amount we're talking about. And I'm just going, that's ridiculous. Another thing that I'm thinking about in this, you'd think when they're talking about greenhouse gas effect that there's a big blanket of CO2 or something, and it's not. There's no blanket. They're talking about it bouncing back and forth, irradiating. A greenhouse traps the air. The sun comes through the glass, it traps the air. It doesn't go out again with the heat because it traps the air inside. Yeah, it converts the radiant heat in the ground in the greenhouse, and then it traps it inside. It would go back out if it wasn't trapped. That's what they're talking about, the greenhouse gas. But guess what? The telltale signs that that's happening in the atmosphere, like down the troposphere over the equator, they're not happening. Now, what do you think warms up? Here's another reason. What do you think is responsible for warming the Earth? Oh, CO2, man-made CO2. A lot of people screaming, oh no, we got a climate emergency. No, the sun. The sun is what warms the Earth. Doesn't it make sense? And not just sunspots, the sun, the radiance from the sun hitting the Earth. If that goes up, the Earth will get a little warmer. If that goes down, and it does go up and down, it will cool down a little bit. And that's what happens. Now, I remember back when I was a kid, the screaming and yelling and the panic was all over global cooling and freezing. The Earth's gonna freeze was everybody's thing. They were going on, I think I was a teenager then. Earth's gonna freeze. Same kind of panic, but it didn't evolve into the insanity we got now. And then, man, after about a decade of that, it stopped and it started being global warming. Why did it do that? Well, one reason was that in the 30s and 40s it was super hot, like crazy, and up into the 50s. Then it started actually cooling off in the 40s and into the 50s. The cooling trend went on for decades, and they thought, oh man, we got global cooling going on. Well, then it started heating up again in the 80s and 70s and 80s and all that. Start heating up again, and I'm going, wait a minute. It's warming up again. And then everything's going like crazy on, oh, we're going to have global warming. And then, well, what, 2000-ish, it stopped heating and stabilized and actually getting some cooling trend now. What is this cycle that sounds like 40 or 50 years? Well, guess what? It's exactly the radiance of the sun. And that's all there. I'm not going to tell you where to go look. If you're interested, you go look. You'll find it. It's easy to find all this information out. And don't go on Google, by the way. If you look up climate change on Google, they're politically correct. Go on DuckDuckGo, and all of a sudden you'll get results. Google will fill you full of advertising first, and then skew the answers, and you might get something buried at the bottom. I don't trust them at all. DuckDuckGo will just give you what's there posted, and you can go find it. Okay. So this global cooling, global warming followed the radiance of the sun. Now, they formed a global body, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. One of the things that the founders of this started talking about right away, and the background purpose of it was forming a global government. And they even said, some of the people involved with this back then, and these quotes can be found, even said things, it doesn't really matter what the climate's doing. We just want the end results to get this government formed. And if you go back and say the Copenhagen Agreement, you'll see where they began to put in front of the nations a treaty they wanted them signed where they would sign on to creating the global government with taxation, with a standing army, with ability to control the nation's economies. And the whistle got blown on it, And that's one reason that a lot of these guys don't sign on anymore, is because this nonsense is going on in there. See, this is why I don't buy into this stuff. It's more about a world government than anything. You notice this past week the Pope came out, and what he's calling for is the eradication of the boundaries of nations so that a global government can control in the nations for the sake of saving the world from the climate change. Global government. And now I wonder if he's a Christian, because he would know that the Bible teaches very clearly God created the nations and the times they exist and the boundaries of their habitations. It says so right in Paul's preaching. And he did it so people would seek him. God is the one who thought up nations and governments and boundaries and borders and the times and seasons nations exist. So what is this stuff with the global government? Well, you watch. That's what it's all about, over and over and over again. Now, back on the sun thing, one of the things that happened last year in 2018 was researchers came out as they reviewed the climate models IPCC, Intergovernmental Climate Change, Panel on Climate Change, put together, and they discovered that there were mathematical errors made. What happened is the input of the sun going in the equations ended up getting canceled out later. So basically the models don't account for the sun at all. That's why 30 out of 31 of the climate models are terribly, terribly wrong. They're so wrong. Why do they keep using them? They go, whoop, the temperature's going up. But it doesn't. It goes, just slightly elevated. And they keep using these things. Well, because they factored out the sun's influence. And they were actually, these guys said, we're actually going to take action against IPCC, and you've got to do something about this. And these are people who are expert reviewers within the Governmental Panel on Climate Change. And by the way, that report that they put out is written by politicians and bureaucrats. It's not written by the scientists. Often the scientists get up in arms against the report. Bet you didn't know that one either. You can find that out. So anyway, instead of saying, oh man, we made a mistake, the climate change panel has doubled down, and they're doubling down around the world. The world's coming to an end. Bill Nye the Science Guy screaming, yelling, swearing, cursing, profanity fit on TV. Because the world's going to burn up. He takes a torch to a globe. You should see that thing. It's just like these guys have lost their minds. And boy, oh boy, it's nuts. Now, yeah, so all these things put together, and I can think of, lots more. Like, for example, the people that are pushing climate change governance, carbon credits, carbon taxes, and all of that so much. Look at them. And this is why I don't believe it, because they don't believe it. They don't believe what they're saying. They're flying to the international conferences in private jets, thousands of them going each year. They're not concerned about the carbon. Why don't they take a commercial airliner and ride in coach or something if they're so concerned about the atmosphere? They're not concerned. And they're not concerned about sea level rise. They're building their luxury places right there by the ocean. And not only that, you get guys like Al Gore and Pachari, who was the head of the IPCC. You look at those guys and you discover, no wonder they're so fixed on doing this. They were making millions. In fact, Al Gore is they call him the first climate billionaire, because guess what? You set up in a company in the middle and you organize here the selling of carbon credits and the buying of carbon credits, but you're the middleman who buys and sells them. You make billions of dollars. And that's what they're doing. Follow the money. Follow the money. And then the nations come together. Well, all the poor economies, all the dictators, they're going to say, climate change is ruining our country. Give us the handout. The money will never get to the people. Money will never get to the people. And then all the talk, of course, over and over again is we've got to clamp down in foreign government. Even in Canada here. Here we've got the carbon tax. What for? Most of it gets given back. In other words, it's nothing to do with helping stop climate, global warming, climate change and all that. We don't got climate emergency. We've got bad weather. Bad weather keeps on happening, and good weather keeps on happening like today. Man, oh man. So, you know what? There's a lot of reasons. That's just a few of them. And I'm just trying to think in my mind. I wrote down dozens of reasons, but the video, it's maybe gone on too long, you know. But there you go. And what I'm saying is, don't believe it. The media's bought into it. Everybody's buying into it. I don't believe any of it. Sure, we might be warming, so what? Did you know, in fact, CO2 does not lead the warming. The warming leads CO2, and you can see that again by everything from ice core samples to the modern stuff. It's there for you to find, and I'm just watching the politicians, you know. So there's my reasons. I'm saying, oh, go out and check it out for yourself. Go see for yourself, and you'll find out what I'm talking about is true. Okay? Well, God bless you. From a great day in the beach here in Campbell River.